everyone and welcome! Somewhat recently on Reddit, a question was brought up. Who is the least powerful champion lore-wise? This is a question that cycled around the internet for years, and today I want to finally call out who this unfortunate champion is. It has to be someone without any powerful connections to magic, someone who's a simple human, and someone who has a terrible weapon. And I know exactly who this might be. But before we dive straight into the candidates, let me quickly go through some of the suggestions brought up on Reddit, because it is important to also talk about why some champions you might think are weak aren't actually far behind. People usually call out champions without parts of them, but it is important to judge them as a package. For example, we can't just look at Nunu without Willump, or Graves without his gun. A champion that was called out a lot was Garen. And Garen is actually far more powerful than you might think. It's all because he is covered in Demacian steel, which is famous for denying all magic. This means you can't attack Garen with magic, and normal ranged weapons mostly bounce off his armor. So you have to engage Garen in melee combat. And Demacian training definitely prepared him for duels. So Garen wouldn't be as low as you might think. Another popular one was Sona. People think all she does is play music, but that's far from the truth. Especially after her story expansion in the client, we definitely know that Sona holds incredible powers. She can basically brainwash and mind control people with her music, meaning that she wouldn't even let anyone attack her. And if you had the will to resist, she can still use her magic to shred her surroundings with sound. The last one I want to mention is Heimerdinger, Corki or Teemo. While they definitely don't seem to be strong, they are Yordles, so automatically they are above all humans. The thing with Yordles is that they walk between the physical and the spirit realm, so magic is very natural to them. So even if you manage to harm a Yordle in the physical world, the chances are that they could be mended from the spirit realm, so they definitely can't be near the bottom. And with these out of the way, I think we can have a look at our list. The rules are simple. Champions are judged only based on their lore. Gameplay has nothing to do with it. They all keep their weapons and armor just as if you found them in-game. Also, we assume the champions are alone in some kind of a 1v1 environment. Some champions might be leaders, but maybe without their people they are useless. So, with these rules set, let's have a look at the weakest champion you can find in the world of League of Legends. So, at number 5, we have Jinx. This was a really tough pick. For number 5, I had to decide between all human characters with simple weapons. And I think it will be easier if I tell you why I didn't pick some other champions instead. Jinx may have a good arsenal, but that's exactly where it ends for her. She was an orphan who grew up in Zone. And while Zone will definitely turn you into a tough kid, it won't teach you about discipline or combat. It's more about assassinations and thievery, and those won't really help you in a fight. Some other champions I considered were Gangplank, Graves or Caitlyn, but all of them have something Jinx doesn't. Graves has a magic-fueled hextech-powered shotgun, and although rockets sound powerful, they still can't compare to the mass destruction of this gun. Gangplank on the other side isn't armed that well, but unlike Jinx, Gangplank is actually tough. While a single bullet could bleed out Jinx, Gangplank survived being in the middle of an explosion, he lost his entire arm, and still, he simply walked away. Just imagine swimming through salty water with one arm in pieces. The closest to Jinx could be Caitlyn. She is also quite fragile and she has limited arsenal, but Caitlyn has a military training, something Jinx definitely doesn't, so Caitlyn would be far more accurate in a duel. There are more champions you might think are weak, like Quinn, Lucian or Misfortune, but they all have more to them than Jinx. So let's quickly rush through all the humans and let's call out what makes them better. Akali. She is trained in both ranged and melee combat. Her speed can outmaneuver Jinx. Ashe. Her legendary bow can freeze entire areas, making it impossible for Jinx to dodge. Fiora. Insanely fast, never lost a duel. Jarvan. He has the best military training in Valorant, if you don't count the Rakor tribe. Jace. His multi-tool gadgets can get him out of any situation. Jhin is a simply unbeatable mastermind. Katarina. While she may not actually have her magical abilities, She is still the second best assassin in Valorant, right after Talon. Olaf, he is technically immortal because he can't escape his fate. Riven is one of the best swordsmen of Noxus. Sivir is empowered through Chalikar, a legendary Shuriman blade. Vayne and Xin Zhao also have Demacian training. And finally, Twisted Fate is a half mage. He may not be super powerful, but you can't catch him. The only champion I personally think is equally bad is Darius. While he has a Noxian training and he is well armored, he has a melee weapon. That is what would give Jinx a chance. But he would still outshine Jinx with years of experience. Assuming they fight in a city, ruins or a forest, Darius would figure something out. So in the end, Jinx takes the number 5. Number 4. Twitch. Twitch is a simple rat that mutated deep in Zone's sump. This turned him into a dangerous sentient being, armed with a chem-powered crossbow. He is resilient to diseases and poisons, and his crossbow can deal some serious damage to humans. In his story, one of the witnesses who survived seeing him got away with melted tongue and lower jaw. So they couldn't even describe him. However, the reason why Twitch would fall flat is because he isn't the smartest, nor is he the most agile. So a single bullet or an arrow would still take him down, not to mention Jinx's rockets. At number 3 we have Gragas. This probably won't surprise most of you, but still, Gragas has more to him than what meets the eye. Gragas technically doesn't have a weapon, while his cask can explode in the game. It definitely doesn't in the story, nor would he want it to explode. The cask contains a shard of true ice. He's using it to cool down his brew, but because the true ice is infinitely melting, it makes the cask bottomless. We know this because this is how Ornn was tricked in his story. The shard of true ice also infused Gragas with very minor powers. Gragas doesn't originally come from Freljord, so he isn't an Iceborn. So all the shard did is that it made him larger. So in the end, Gragas is just a giant without a weapon or a combat training. All he is relying on is his drunken rage. And while it can power him through a lot, it can't keep up with proper weapons. At number 2, we have Nunu. Or to be specific, Nunu and his Yeti Willump. Honestly, Nunu and Gragas are so equal it is hard to say who is worse. The only deciding factor is Willump's abilities. Nunu's story doesn't say anything about Yetis being able to blast enemies with ice magic, nor does it say anything about them supping the area of heat. All we know is that the Yetis are strong beasts from Freljord, so it seems like Willump is only armed with his claws and fangs. Nunu is basically just riding Willump. I don't even think Nunu can do anything at all. He is just a child after all, he isn't even a Yordle. So a battle of Gragas against Willump would be very close. It's just like two giants wrestling. It would be like watching Godzilla vs King Kong, where Godzilla would be Nunu and King Kong would be Gragas. The outcome would be somewhat random, but in the end I decided to put Nunu at number 2. And now on to number 1. This will be a shock to a lot of you, but I can support this decision with facts. And I spend a lot of time digging through facts, damn it. And I stay very confident saying that it doesn't matter what champion you name, it will always be more powerful than my number 1. Because the weakest champion in the world of League of Legends is Draven. I understand why a lot of people didn't even consider Draven. In game he feels and looks very powerful, like he's not even a human. He's throwing deadly axes, he's swift and agile, but is that really what he does in the story? You see, Draven isn't the most skilled in combat, his training is one of the weakest, and his weapons straight up suck. While in battle, Draven doesn't really think about consequences. He rushes into battle and hopes for the best, and he mostly wins because Noxians outnumber their enemies, and that's why his training isn't good. Noxians are trained to fall in line and attack in masses. Individual Noxian warriors are weak, but they swarm the enemy in huge numbers. In Darius's comic, we even see Draven rushing into battle, only to be blown up shortly after, simply because he wanted to rush in first. His grasp of tactics is minimal, and what makes things even worse are his weapons. In game he can throw axes all over the place, But in reality, he only has 2 X's, and if he throws them away, that's it. Suddenly, he has nothing. The reason why his X's returned to his hands in-game is because Riot wanted to make a unique AD carry, something without guns or bows, so they went with throwing X's. And while this concept sounds really cool, it doesn't really work in reality. Let's compare him to the 2 champions above him. Both Gragas and Nunu can deal with Draven easily. Either Draven goes into melee and uses his X's for close combat. In that case, I highly doubt it would save him against someone whose hands are as big as Draven's torso. In Nunu's story, for example, Willem shreds through the Frostguard warriors like paper. And those warriors are skilled and armed with far better weapons. And if Draven decides to use his X's from range, he only has 2 shots. And even if he manages to stick them in Nunu or Gragas, it won't stop them. Nunu and Gragas are not dumb, so they can just block the X's with one arm and use the other arm to crush Draven. Yes, it will probably hurt, but Draven's X's can hardly deal fatal damage. Gragas can power through it with Drunken Rage, and Nunu can simply take the hits. So, in the end, I have no other choice than to declare Draven as the weakest champion according to the lore. Remember that while the logic in this video was heavily supported with facts, feel free to argue with me in the comments. Especially number 5 and 4 can be taken by any other champion with the right argument. But for now, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like it and subscribe for more lore and news. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Discord if you'd like to chat. Our merch and P.O.Box will be in the description. Special thanks to our patrons for going the extra mile, you have no idea what it means to me. And with that, thank you all so much for being here and for your support, you know I really appreciate it. And as always, thank you, come again.